working, but there was like a little glitch. So maybe it's working, maybe it's not. I'm not going to worry about it too much. As Kurt said, I can see there's still a handful of people who've joined us. So nice to see you all on this Tuesday night in October. Most, but not all of our virtual tastings are going to be on Tuesday nights just because they're a little easier for us to manage. And it's a little quieter than later on in the week. And we've got some great tastings coming up. So I might as well just take a quick moment here while we wait for a handful more stragglers to just quickly highlight some of the other tastings that are coming up, including one on Friday that we've still got a few sample sets for. And we've had a big turnout for this one, but not as big as I might have thought. And it's our Bruichladdich cask launch virtual tasting, possibly because we went with a very unusual theme this time. Rather than just do a Bruichladdich range, which would be great if there was Bruichladdich with which to do a big range tasting, which there is not, we decided to highlight some of our single casks that we feel deserve a lot more attention. In particular, our Tomatin 2006 and our new Tobermory from Berry Brothers, both of which are awesome. But in addition to trying our new Bruichladdich cask, which is dropping for those taking part in the tasting this week and for everybody else next week, you get to try our last Bruichladdich cask, which I'm not sure we ever featured in a tasting because it arrived during COVID. And that was, I believe, before we were able to do samples.
But let's face it, it came in one door and went right out the other one too. That was
it was
even cask.
It was nuts. It was gone within 2 days of it landing in store. We're trying to slow that down because even for us, like as much as selling all that in a flash sounds great, it's not all that great in reality. But there's still some spots left for that tasting. It's going to be a fun lineup. I'm pretty sure I have a puppy sitter in place for that one, but I guess we'll find out. In storefront, we've got Shelter Point coming in to do a relaunch tasting with their new brand ambassador, a guy by the name of Chris Reed. So he's going to be joining us. I'm hoping that we'll have a sample of the 10-year for that tasting, but you never know. Unfortunately, that one is in store. But if you want to stay virtual, Harmony and Evan have their Rye Not Rye tasting coming up in a couple weeks, or 9 days. So not that far off. And this boutique rum tasting, which I'm surprised, like rum is finally starting to catch on. And it's kind of a cool tasting range, decent price for it too. And anyway, there's spots left. Our Glenfarclas tasting, if you're in Calgary, we've got 2 of them back to back. We'd love to do this one virtually, but we can't. But as many of you know, we already have a really cool pair of 1990s and 2000s tastings with Glenfarclas coming up. The last one I'll plug is the Kind of Rare and Old Whiskies. Evan and I have talked about this. We need to replace this image because it's not selling it. But for this range, we've got some really cool stuff, including a pair of 1990s millstones. We've got the Glendronach 1990, Benriach 97, which were recently released. And I think 3 Edredars, Kurt, does that? Yeah, 3 Edredars that are either 21 or 22 years of age.
Yeah. I think too, it has to be said that I think you and I and probably Sean and Evan, I can't remember who was there, when we had that last heavily sherried millstone, we all went like, holy hell, this tastes like Old Macallan. Like, how did they manage this? So those ones are not going to be anything that's just a gloss over bottle. Those are going to be hella cool to taste.
Absolutely. Well, and Sean and I got to try in London at the whiskey show, the Boutique Whiskey guys for their 10th anniversary. They did a cask of 1995 millstone from sherry. The thing about Patrick at that time is he couldn't get regular sherry casks. So they're actually sherry maturation casks, which is not what the industry uses anymore. And it is insane. It is so thick, rich, and fruity. So if we get that, we'll try to crack that one open too. But yeah, those sherry 1990s millstones are something else. Like they're pretty intense.
Just before we move on from tastings, Andrew, I did chat with Harmony and Evan today and just put the bug in your ear coming up. For those that are chasing cool bourbons and ryes and all the North American goodies, we did just confirm that we're going to do a Buzzard's Roost tasting. All those bottles with those cool ass labels that everybody's curious about, and they're sending us 2 more that aren't in the market. So there's going to be a couple really special ones that we're cracking open. And then Jason, the big guy from the company, is going to be leading us through it. So that date is going to be announced for late November, theoretically. Keep an eye for that one. And on the rum front, Andrew, I think you're going to have one of our furthest away guests ever too. Lance is going to be zooming in from Kuwait for that. He's so keen.
Yeah, but I guess he won't be tasting. He'll just be participating.
He does want the samples, though. He'll be buying the samples to try when he gets back here next month.
Nice. Yeah, one last one too. We're also in the process of setting up a Michter's tasting that is going to go up to and include the 20-year. So that's going to be a cool tasting. You might be wondering, why would we pour the Michter's 20 in a tasting? Well, I'm glad you asked. We only got one bottle, and I'd rather 40 people drink it than one person flip it. So that's what we're going to do. All right, without further ado, this is our old first malt editions cask tasting, which was probably too clever a title, but we thought it was kind of funny. This all started because a bunch of whiskeys arrived that there had been a miscommunication about how much of it we'd ordered, and a lot of it was very interesting, but I think they thought we were taking all of it, which was never going to be the case unless we got to try it. Nevertheless, I want to say thank you to Lee Hansen from Select Wines. Covered a couple of the bottles that we put into tonight's lineup, helped us keep the price down. But what I think is noteworthy about tonight's tasting is if you look at the age statements of this range, I mean, almost everything is in their late teens or 20s. I guess there's a couple of exceptions to it, but it's a rather mature lineup, which is not something that we see a lot of anymore. 4 of the whiskeys in their 20s. It's kind of cool. So when these came in, we thought we better do a tasting. That's how we find ourselves here. And we're going to start off with possibly one of the oldest whiskeys I've ever had from Royal Lochnagar. I certainly can't think of a lot of older ones. I think back in the day, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kurt, but I think there was a Diageo limited edition about 14 years ago that was about 25 years of age.
Yeah, there was, I can say this unequivocally because we have a guy in my whiskey club, Stuart. I think you've met him, great big muscly Scotch dude. Stuart used to lead tours at Lochnagar. So when he was, when we were doing tastings for the old club, we said, if we bring in the whiskeys, will you talk to them? We hunted and hunted and hunted, and we maxed out at 4 Lochnagar over like 3 years of trying to find anything cool. So it's been an absolute Sahara for cool Lochnagar.
Yeah. Well, and a big part of that is it's a very small distillery. It's, one of the smallest in the space side. I know Ben Romick Distillery was smaller than it at one point, and Ben Romick was still producing, I think, about 400 to 500,000 liters at that time. And Royal Lochnagar, if I remember, I went there, I think in the late 2010s, and it might have been at about 600,000 liters per annum. Not very much production. And a lot of it goes into Johnny Walker. So that's the main reason why we don't see very much Royal Lochnagar. It's also whiskey that we don't see bottled by independent bottlers very often, because I don't think Diageo is in the habit of trading off their stocks of this very often. Yeah, so kind of a cool one to put into the lineup tonight. This is distilled in 2000. And, I think we said it was the oldest Royal Lochnagar we've ever seen. Certainly one of them, matured 21 years in refill hogsheads and bottled at 50%. 20 plus years of age, refill hogsheads. That's usually a secret sauce or a recipe for success from my standpoint. And the nose so far is pretty promising. I'm getting like cheese and fruit. It's like I'm going to a wine tasting.
Really, really soft cheesy notes. If there's some cheesy notes in there, white, kind of runny cheeses, if anything.
Well, I was going to say like, not real cheddar, the dyed orange, the stuff that you get at like a university wine and cheese function, because there's a budget. So they're not getting into the fanciest cheeses.
With some canned meats. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's some grapes, like there's just some random grapes on the plate too.
Is that pate or meow mix? Gross.
Um,
Pretty nose though.
no,
On this one.
what's that?
It's a very pretty nose on this.
It is. It's floral. It's light, soft. It's decadent.
Oh, Chris just nailed it. Honeydew. I love it. I was trying to put my finger on what the like soft ruby tone was, but it's really kind of melony.
Well, like dried apricot too. I think you can get a little bit of that in there as well. But yeah, I agree. The honeydew is a good note.
Thanks, Sky. Pretty nose, lovely face. Coming back to a comment earlier to Andrew, just as a really quick aside before it gets lost, somebody asked about the cask type for our Bruichladdich. We won't get into the long story. This one is bourbon, I believe. Do you remember what the previous one was?
Bourbon.
Bourbon as well? Okay.
Yeah.
Here's your answer. We'll come back to that later though.
Yeah, and regardless, I mean, it's it's a bit of a funny story, and perhaps we should not spoil that. We should save it for the night of. But suffice to say, it was a bloody good. It's a bloody good cask. We're really happy with it. We think it's going to be popular, and you know, what is it? It's a young age statement Bruichladdich, which is something we don't see very much of, and kind of shocking to me. I mean, it surprises me that, you know, what is it now? It's 7 or 8 years or 10 years into the Remy Cointreau buyout. Like, it's been a while.
10.
And yeah, and 22 years since they reopened it. Like, there's got to be stock of like 10, 15, 18-year-old whiskey. Where is it? I would love to know.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be that Remy's maturing it until it hits 100. So 3 generations from now. I mean, that is kind of what they do with their Louis XIII cognac brand. So maybe that's what's going on, but I hope not.
That Lochnagar is changing a lot for me. I'm getting some more citrus tones. I'm getting like a slight botanical sort of tone. That cheesiness has kind of grown just a touch and slightly salty.
Mm-hmm.
More orange fruits now, and more orange fruit and kind of tobacco on the palate too.
Mm-hmm.
I really dig this whiskey a lot.
Yeah. So long fermentations, slow distillation, and even with that, it is one of Diageo's smallest distilleries. In fact, it is their smallest distillery out of 29. And for those who aren't familiar, there's a royal connection to this. Queen Victoria could see this distillery from her bedroom window. Now, I've been to Balmoral, not on official business, just I toured it because I was visiting the distillery, and I've been to the distillery. You can't really see either from the other today, but back in the day, maybe there was less trees, and the Queen could see it. She apparently likes to drink it. She was obsessed with all things Highland during the Victorian era, which actually created a tourist boom and was one of the major reasons that rail networks spread to parts of Scotland like the Speyside and Western Highlands, was because English people were fascinated that Queen Victoria was so in love with Scotland, so they wanted to go see it for themselves. But it's a cool distillery. Again, one we see very little of, sadly. And, you know, the official bottlings, though never bad, I can never remember being wowed by any of the young Lochnagars, because probably refill casks, nothing too exciting.
Yeah, agreed. This is one of the best I've ever had for sure. And I'm really liking it. Candy floss, strawberry candy, strawberry starbursts. It's from Kevin.
Man, it is so floral on the palate. It's like someone is trying to shove a botanical garden down your throat. And drying, it's like this, it's fruity, drying, and very floral, long finish.
I don't remember the last time I had a whiskey like that.
Mm-hmm. To be honest, like I've had, and actually I think I've had some Manickmore like refill bourbon that kind of go in this direction. Manickmore is one of the few whiskeys I can think of that kind of gets that floral, but yeah.
I would 99% of the time take a Manickmore over Lochnagar, but to me, this is exactly what I'm looking for in Lochnagar.
Well, it's been given time to reach its potential instead of being bottled at 12 years of age or dumped into Johnny Walker.
Eaten up by the walking man.
Mhm. Which it's funny to see, for those of you who don't know, Dr. Nick Morgan, who was with Diageo for the longest time, he's now retired and casting stones. It's kind of fun to see some of his comments in places. But anyway, so that was our first one today. Yeah, Kurt, comment, question, point?
Not commenting on Nick Morgan. Zip,
Yeah.
wiki away.
Fair enough. All right, well, I think that's a great starter. Nice floral, fruity, single malt. And that takes us to the Linkwood 18. This is distilled 2002, bottled at 18 years. And for those who aren't familiar, Douglas Laing, their old malt cask line is almost always bottled at 50%. The only exceptions to that I know of is they've bottled a few casks for us over the years at cask strength with their old malt cask label. And on one or two occasions, we've actually seen old malt cask bottlings that fell below 50%. So they got bottled at whatever the strength was below 50%. Not too often that we see that. Old malt cask brand has been around for a fairly long time. I mean, I can remember it coming out in Canada in the early 2000s. But back then it was coming from Douglas Laing. Today it's coming from Hunter Laing. Essentially the Laing brothers had a great business, couldn't play nice with each other. Or maybe there was going to be generational squabbles in a Game of Thrones fashion, and they decided to go their own way. And Stuart Laing and his sons went off and founded Douglas Laing, and the other Laing, Fred Laing, went off with his daughter Cara and kept Douglas Laing, and they partitioned some of the brands between them. And they continued to be the independent bottlers bottling the most Port Ellen, at least until recently. But nothing lasts forever. Anyway, Linkwood, I'll share my screen here so we can all see it. What have we got? This is the one here. And I thought I'd written up a tasting note for this one. I guess I haven't. First impressions, Kurt?
I like it, but I'm a huge Linkwood fan. Linkwood, for those that aren't too geeky with this kind of stuff, is another Diageo distillery. It's one of the ones they consider their top dressing malts, like big flavoring agents for a lot of their blends when they're looking for the fruitier side of things. I think it's actually one of the 4 in green label, isn't it? Memory serves.
In the, sorry?
Is it one of the 4 in green label as well? I'm trying to remember. There's Talisker, Kalila, and then 2 that are a bit lighter. Anyways, ultimately doesn't matter. But Linkwood to me is one of either it's this sort of ex-bourbon fruit bomb in youth, or you get the ones that are like 40 years old and heavy sherry and the absolute most legendary bottlings of all time. So I'm a sucker for both profiles of Linkwood. Andrew hinted at a lot of these are like second fill, like Hoggies or whatever else. That is, you can't ask for a better vessel to turn whiskey into something special. So this one, soft, fruity, everything I kind of hoped for. Candied fruits this time, deeper than just the real fruit tones. Almost like you get some orange and red jujubes in there in the back of the nose for me.
I'm getting a lot of marzipan and like almond paste filled croissants. That's sort of the where this one's going for me. There's kind of a nice nuttiness to it too.
And there's a nice kind of almondy tone on the palate as well, with a lot of sweetness there, but it's like, it's soft. But it's almost like toasted almond. It's not like fresh marzipan kind of.
For Charlene, who just joined us, you've not missed much. We were on whiskey number 2. We started with the Royal Lochnagar. We're currently on the Linkwood 18, and I've put the on both Kurt and I've put the order back in the chat there for you, so that you can find your way.
Chris says he's getting a cream note on the nose, almost like hazelnut whipped cream. Hazelnut whipped cream, yes, please. I love hazelnuts.
Yeah, there's a like Nutella kind of sweet, creamy slightly chocolatey note coming off on there too. Some nice soft fruits, more going towards the orange, like the citrusy side of things than we saw with the Royal Lochnagar, which I agree was more melons and stone fruits.
It's almost that chocolatey tone with that citrus. It's almost like Terry's oranges, the ones you hammer down on the table and break into wedges.
You know what's funny? I don't think I've ever had one of those before.
They're a little too orangey for me, but they're good.
Yeah. Well, and as we discovered last Friday when Ashok was in for our Amrut tasting, there's only so much orange that I'd like to have in things. Sometimes you can have a little too much orange, but you can never have too much Amrut. Well, you probably can actually, but it's still going to taste good.
It's true.
Yeah, this is not an overly complicated whiskey to me, but it's elegant. It's showing its age nicely without being over the top. The oak is a light touch. We blather on about this at a lot of tastings, Kurt, but I think for both of us, like this kind of style we really like, where you've got a lot of development of the spirit in the bottle, and not too much oak. Sometimes having a lot of oak is good. I mean, I've had good whiskeys where you have that, like, really good backbone, or like an old school sherry style whiskey in particular. But for this, it's just, yeah.
I think this is the kind of whiskey for people who like really vibrant, rich sort of whiskeys. Like it's a fruit bomb to me. I would have loved to have seen that in a slightly more tired cask with 10 more years on it. I'll bet you that would have been absolutely stunning. With a cask bad active, I don't think it could stay any longer.
Yeah, I don't think you could have left up this for 10 years.
No.
Getting kind of like a grapey fruit note now too, towards the finish. Finish is a little light, but very pleasant and enjoyable. And that's when we took a bit of a position on, just kind of felt it was one of the better bottlings out of this range. We had extremely high hopes for one, not saying which, that we're going to get to in a little bit here. And we'll see how those measure up. But there's the link for the Linkwood for anyone who wants some more information. You can check it out on the site. Any other comments or thoughts on that? We're going to go back through these two before we wrap up, just to see how they evolve in the glass, how they change. And actually, I guess before we forget, we should probably wish one of our colleagues a happy birthday. She's not on the tasting tonight, but it's Harmony's birthday. So happy birthday, Harmony.
Happy birthday. Kevin just reinforcing a couple of things that came earlier, said he definitely gets the hazelnuts, but he also backed your grape comment there too.
Yeah.
A bit of ginger. I thought I was getting a little bit of like a clean, spicy hint to it, but I wasn't getting peppery. So ginger's probably what I was. Good call on that one.
Yeah, like sliced ginger or something like that. Something that's just not too kind of sweet. All right, let's move on, shall we, to the Glenburgie 21. We love
Actually,
our. Sorry,
this one's not a Glenburgie, Andrew. It's a Glenburgie.
Oh, is there a typo on it?
There might be a slight typo on there. Our bad.
Glenburgie. Hey, this is an extremely rare and collectible whiskey because it's one that people have not come across before. Yeah, in defense of myself or Evan or whomever did these labels, I'm not sure spell check works all that well in our label maker software. Also suggesting it might not be me. I tend to cut and paste from the website, so just saying. He who's not here, can't defend himself. And Kurt, you've got one. I get a bit of like dog food right off the bat on the nose here. And then citrus, like there's this grapefruit. It's like dog food and grapefruit juice.
I kind of think I get where you're going with that, but I don't. Because dog food to me is not a good smell, but I do kind of get that meaty, sort of kibbly. Yeah, I kind of see
not the wet stuff, the kibble.
This one's a deeper one. It's actually a little bit harder to unravel.
I think
no, Andrew, Vincent just hung you out to dry, dude. It probably was
Oh,
you.
so was me.
Vincent, you're a champ.
But that's why we love having fact checkers. So gonna text Evan to fix that while we're on it. That's pretty funny.
Kevin's getting a cardboard note.
Oh, that's so funny. Fix.
I'm just bouncing back and forth between those first three for a little bit of context, and man, that Lochnagar still shows really pretty.
It does, but I mean the nose is starting. It's so light, it's starting to fade a bit in comparison with the others. But yeah, it's very pretty.
I like that though. I think it means it's not just a fruit bomb. It's a little bit more like interwoven.
Yeah.
The Glenburgie is really neat. There's some like fruit in dough sort of notes to me, like not actually baked, not any kind of actual baking at this point, just dough or batter or something.
What was the distillery that Mark Gerard kept getting wrong? And then it just became like a joke. It'll come to me later.
So we have so many of these mispronunciations and they're so much fun. I feel like we're picking on people, but we're not really. We all.
Oh, right. Aberdelphi.
Aberdelphi. I was gonna say.
Yeah, that was amazing.
We've had Glenfroig. We've had Oshentashan. We've had, like, it just goes on and on and on. They're so much fun. We'll collect them someday.
Well, I was having a good laugh in London with Lily from Elixir Distillers about this, because she's French and she often goes and hosts master classes in France, and some of the especially French people Frenchifying Scottish words which are hard to pronounce even in Scotland. She said it's just hilarious. But yeah, I think Glenburgie and Aberdelphi, we should trademark those names for undisclosed whiskeys from those distilleries. I'm happy to report that kibble note seems to have blown off.
Yeah, I wasn't getting it in the first place, but mine were kind of open and poured a little bit before everybody's here, I would guess. But that's a beautiful whiskey. But I think we're a little bit biased. We've bottled casks Glenburgie in the past before. It's a distillery we sort of actively chase, I think, as a whiskey team there. And this one's not disappointing. This is right in my wheelhouse as well.
The palate is absolutely gorgeous, like creamy, fruity, soft, floral. Yeah. No kibble.
Just enough age. It's starting to get into those cool sour fruit notes I look for. Almost into tropicals.
Swedish fish. Those Swedish fish candies.
Oh, now I want those. Actually, that was one of those things I always rated for my kids' Halloween bags. I love Swedish fish.
Yeah, it's not quite to the sour cow kids or sour whatever the hell those things are, but it's more like that Swedish fish kind of candy.
James says perfectly balanced on that one.
The nose though, like the dominant thing on there for me is like grapefruit. Like I just can't believe how much kind of like that sour citrus grapefruit tone is through.
Kevin says it's the worst of the three so far.
Evan also wants people to know that if you search for Glenburgie on the website, even though he's fixed the spelling, it should still come up. So, because why not?
Yeah, I'm not getting that cardboardy note. I'm also not getting anything kibbly anymore. Like I said, I could kind of get where you're going there, but it's probably because mine is oxidized for, I don't know, a while, 35 minutes now.
I think what it essentially is it's like it's just that oak, musty oak is what it essentially we're getting is cardboard, and what I interpreted as a little bit of kibble at the start. part of me doubts it, because I mean, this is a Pernod distillery, isn't it? Glenburgie, yeah. It might be stored in dunnage warehouses. I know they used to have like a whole pile of them near Glenkeith. Although a bunch of them collapsed when that snowstorm happened and Glenfiddich made some marketing out of it. But I have to imagine a big chunk of their production is in giant, like, palletized warehouses. So, but it does have kind of a bit of a dunnagey funk to it.
Almost like a little bit of corn on the back of the finish, as silly as that sounds. Just like
Corn?
soft green corn. Yeah, like really sort of sweet. Not that bourbony kind of corn we're all used to. I'm on team Phil with this one. He says another beautiful Glenburgie. Yeah, man. We'll drink this together, buddy.
Well, and James is saying sometimes that you can have, and it's true, you can have corked whiskeys. We've had lots of corked whiskeys over the years at the shop. I don't think this is personally a corked whiskey, but different people have different sensitivities. Maybe that's something I can train Walter to do, to identify TCA.
I love it. Our own truffle dog will keep us safe from the hazards of sulfur and TCA.
Right. That's right. Anyway, yeah, great. You know, that's going to be a tough contender. I think it's going to be up there for me so far. Granted, we're only 3 whiskeys in without.
And the great thing is, Kevin's going, wow, ha, ha, let all these suckers take that one. That's less people buying the ones I want.
There you go. Yeah.
I can't lie. This next one, I am absolutely over the moon to be drinking today.
Oh,
it's
man.
in a couple of my private tastings, I think, as well. So I'm looking forward to doing this several times. Andrew, I think, got the bug on this one too, and we've been deep on this one because the cask just kind of wowed us, and just for how scarce it is.
Yeah, and I think the other part about this one was like, kind of felt that the price on it for a 29-year-old Miltonduff, you know, I'm not saying it's not inexpensive, but especially compared to 21-year-old Lochnagar, I kind of felt like there was some good value here on this one. So it's a 1990 29-year-old Miltonduff, matured in a refill hogshead cask and bottled at 57.2%. I don't know if we got all of it in Alberta, but I'm pretty sure we got 80% of it. So I'll share my screen here so you guys can see it. So this is one of our first editions whiskeys in tonight's lineup, and I believe we have 2. And yeah, I jumped on this. I'm a huge fan of Miltonduff, like Glenburgie. It's a distillery that I think often doesn't get as much attention as it should. Glen Talkers you could throw in there too, and they're kind of the silent workhorses of the Ballantines blends. And it kind of neglect is kind of on their side with these older whiskeys, because these distilleries are quite old school by the standards of the modern industry. They're run in an old school way. They're not uber modern. And most of their whiskey gets put into refill casks. And when it's left there for 20 to 30 years, it can be pretty special.
I think, you and I had an experience with a couple of our mates, a couple of our people who are friends and customers, actually. We went out for some drinks the other evening. And one of these souls was kind enough to open a bottle that he had just been handed, he picked up via auction and had been shifted overwards. And it was a crazy cool old bottle of Dufton. Things like what we're drinking tonight, with a lineup that includes Lochnagars and Linkwoods and Miltonduffs and stuff. And then, harkening back to that one we had just a couple days ago. I love that we have people that do these tastings with us that are discerning enough to hunt good whiskey, that aren't hung on a brand name, that we can get a little geeky with some of these cool distilleries that get overlooked way too much. They're fun. They're way cooler than so many out there that are, mass batting and boring the shit out of us, like Delmore and stuff. So
yeah, and I mean, again, there was an article that I saw today which I quite liked, which was talking about how, it seems like we're in this stage right now where every whiskey released has to be like special. It has to be something other than just a great whiskey. And I guess it's to continue driving that hype and the collectability factor. And yeah, I mean, look at how pale, like this is, it's got color, but it's still quite pale for something 29 years of age. And yet the nose is just thick and creamy. It's doughy. I've got like, and I can't remember if I used this recently in another tasting, but it reminds me of this boiled Scottish dessert called Clootie dumpling, which is kind of like doughy and fruity, and they boil it. And yeah, it reminds me of that.
We're now into like, so this sounds like I'm saying it as in a negative connotation. Into those sour sort of fruit tones. I hunt for that. That's what I want in fruits. I don't want just a soft apple-y kind of note. I want something that's leaning into the tangier side that makes me think Five Alive, takes me to those kind of notes and stuff like that. That's where fruit gets exciting to me. This one is getting into those sour fruit tones now, and not just like nudging into them. Now we're properly into them. It's tropical on the nose. It's got all the hallmarks of older whiskey, little bits of like almost kind of a latex paint sort of note, or play like putty or something that's really, really soft in the background that always like softens up the whiskey for me. This is everything I look for in whiskey.
The palate I was going to say is definitely going into that tropical fruit character. There is a bit of that sour fruit in there too, but it's mostly for me going into that tropical, thick coating, creamy. I mean, even after the last three whiskeys we've had, this one just seems to have so much more weight and body to it. And granted, a big part of that could be 57.2 as opposed to just 50%. But yeah, there's a lot going on with this.
What a fantastic development on the palate too. Like after you've sipped and like just letting it slowly play out on the palate, is the fruits evolve in insane ways.
Mm-hmm.
Nice firm oakiness too, without being tannic and grippy.
And I'm actually still getting like some nice grain, like malty grain, almost flinty terroir. I know we hate to use that word in this a little bit, but I can almost get a little bit of that out of this too. Like there's some really nice depth to it. It's very, someone used this earlier as very well-rounded. I think that this has got the most well-rounded palate of any of the whiskeys that we've had so far tonight.
I can't lie. When you were talking about going fairly deep on this, like bringing in a bunch of it, I was like, man, that's a hefty price tag for a distillery that not a lot of people are going to be hunting for, but who's looking for Miltonduff, right? I'm so glad we took lots of this. So glad we took lots of this.
So about 10 years ago, actually around the time the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society came to Canada, I had a couple of like late 20s, early 30s Miltonduffs that just blew my mind. And so anytime I would go to the vaults in Edinburgh or to Greyville Street in London, I would ask them if they had any old Miltonduffs. And so I've picked up a decent number of late 20s, early 30s Miltonduffs from the society over the years, because they have that really like deep, complex, tropical, creamy style. And yeah, it's a whiskey that I would say I've had a fondness for now for a little more than a decade. But you're right. I mean, these are the sort of things where there might be some people in tonight's tasting and a handful of others that get what Miltonduff can be, but to the rest of them, it's just a name that doesn't mean anything. Because there's no branding behind Miltonduff. There's no marketing behind Miltonduff. The only official release they've ever done was part of that promoting the Ballantines range, and it was dreadful. So I mean, your average consumer just has no appreciation for what potential it has as a single malt.
So cool.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that when I first started working at KWM, there was that green label Miltonduff. I think it was a G&M one, memory serves.
Oh yeah, the 10-year.
Yeah, I really struggled with that whiskey. Not because I thought it was bad, but we had so much of it in, and it was Miltonduff at 10 years old, and nobody cared.
And it was sherried. It was like,
it was
that color.
It was decent whiskey, but a hard sell.
And it was $80, and nobody wanted it.
Yep.
I mean, I thought it was good. I'm more into that refill cask 20s and
Sure.
30 something Miltonduff regardless, but yeah, it's a whiskey that just doesn't have cachet. I mean, even when we get bottles in that you or I or Sean look at and we're like, oh man, look how cool, look this old Miltonduff, I'm dying to try it. Like, we don't have like people trolling our website with the keyword Miltonduff waiting for something new to pop up. Like, which to me, I guess is kind of a shame. Like they should be, because it's excellent. Anyway, I think we've bottled one Miltonduff over the years. We bit of spoiler, little bit of a tangent here. We are bottling a third Amrut cask as of Friday. We selected a cask, which is pretty exciting. And one of the things that's kind of cool is we were talking with the importers and with Ashok about it, and how it was at least our 120th cask that we've bottled over the years. And Ashok actually wanted to know exactly how many casks we've bottled. So I spent some time this morning doing research, and including 4 that we have coming. I don't know if you remember the email, Kurt, but did I say it was like the 144th?
I thought it was 145 so far, but maybe the Amrut would be the 145th.
I think the Amrut would be the 145th, which, I mean, that's got to be more than Depot and Co-op and Willow Park have bottled
collectively.
So, and we're just one little shop.
And with this cask, I can't wait to have everybody weigh in on this one. Because I'm going to be totally honest with you, totally transparent, because I typically shoot from the hip. This was the first time in 5 years where the little quorum that we have that pick these whiskeys, Andrew, Evan, myself, whomever little group we have, didn't have a consensus right off the bat. It got a little scrappy. It was like, man, I don't know what are you seeing in this one, as we went through the samples and stuff. When we narrowed it down to this one, it was like, okay, thank God we actually agreed on one that we're all happy with. But it was contentious. And I think this one is a wicked Amrut. I can't wait to have it roll out. I think Andrew's probably more excited than I am too to have it roll out. So you guys need to weigh in on this one and see how we did on that one.
It's a first for us. It's the first time we've ever bottled a port cask. I never thought we'd bottle a port cask.
I don't like port cask whiskeys generally, and I got excited for this. So
yeah.
Cool.
There was a little debate because there was 3 that I think were in contention, and like half of us really liked the first, half liked the third, but everyone really liked the second, and I think that's what it came down to. It might not have been everybody's first pick, but it was one that everyone's like, yeah, that's a great cask. So, and it's almost 9 years old, but not priced anywhere near what the Greedy Angels go for. So
I'm just praising Jeebus or Kali or
Vishnu.
Whatever we need to, that we didn't go with number 1. I know it would have been some of you guys like tickle freaking pink for it, but man, I'm a happy boy.
Yeah. There's been a little debate back and forth here, and it turns out Kensington Wine Market has bottled 144 more casks than the LCBO. Even if they have bottled it by Gordon MacPhail. But anyway, yeah. Still funny. I mean, not for the people who live in Ontario, obviously, but kind of for the rest of us. So we have a crazy new premier, so that's, you've got us beat on that front. Shall we move on to the Ben Nevis 24? Old malt cask, Ben Nevis 24. But I guess we all have crazy premiers. I mean, I can think of at least 4 of them, but anyway, we won't go there. Yeah. Man, so this whiskey was one that when I saw it just listed, I was a little bit apprehensive with the price on it, but I was like, man, we should just go for it, because it's a whiskey that we've had a lot of success with over the years. And for some reason, our bottle shot's not showing right now. So I'm going to go dig it up, but, and I'll show it to you later, but I'm going to pull up the site page first. 24-year-old Ben Nevis from 1996. How could you possibly go wrong with that? We've had so many amazing Ben Nevis from 1996, and we could talk about why that is. It could be the fact that they were still using brewer's yeast back then, really long, slow fermentations. The casks that they put them in were either like great sherry or tired old bourbon, and a lot of great whiskey came out of that. And I'm not going to lie, Kurt said that before, but I'm not going to lie with this one. My heart sank a little when I nosed and tasted this the first time. I'm hoping that decanting it in these little bottles almost 2 months ago has done it some favors, because I really had high hopes for this. But even now, like, I get like fish oil and beef bouillon cubes. I mean, there's
It's a
some
little bit
nice
Campbellton.
What's that?
It's a little bit Campbellton in a way.
It is. And it's not as dreadful as I remembered it being when we first tasted. And it was just like, oh God. So maybe there was a bit of bottle shock, or maybe who knows what. Maybe it needed time to breathe.
When did you buy, or when did you start at Kensington?
2003. So I'm about a month away from my 19th anniversary.
2003. I think we need a t-shirt that says Andrew Ferguson, damning whiskey with faint praise since it's not as dreadful. That's not doing this one any favors.
Not as dreadful as I remember.
So Andrew, you had the screen up a moment ago. This was another 96, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you guys aren't in the loop already, if you see 1996 Ben Nevis, buy it. Don't ask questions. Fight for the best price if you have to, but buy the bloody whiskey. 1996 Ben Nevis has become one of those legendary vintages already. Mm-hmm. We talked about terroir earlier. We're finding vintages in whiskey now too. You can look at 93 Glendronachs. You can look at 83 Ben Riachs. You can look at 72 Glendronachs. Sorry?
64 Bowmore.
Yeah, there's certain vintages in whiskey that turned out to be really, really, really special. And there's a parcel of unnamed Isla as well from 1992 that's made the rounds. There's also a parcel of Irish whiskey that has become legendary. But Ben Nevis 96, unbelievable 99% of the time. This one is the 1% of the time. I'm more forgiving than Andrew. This one doesn't wow me like some of the others do, but it is thoroughly Ben Nevis. It's just maybe not the best cask on this one. The palate still shows brilliantly on the mid palate to finish for me. It's a little bit dirty and kind of like maybe you had a great barrel of Ben Nevis and dropped your dirty wrench in it or something, but otherwise it's still cool whiskey.
It's better on the palate than the nose. And it's better than I remembered it being when I tried it. But I think I'd probably set myself unrealistic expectations for what it was going to be. And those were just not possible to be met. And it's not the only bad Ben Nevis 96 I've had. I know an unnamed retailer in Alberta had a 96 cask that they bottled. I don't know if it was for themselves or for someone's club. And I remember being envious of it until I tried it. I mean, we lucked out. We had an absolutely stunning 22-year-old Ben Nevis cask from Single Malts of Scotland that was sherry. It was gooey. You had these like intense, cheesy, fruity tones coming from it. It was a rock star cask. It was hands down one of our 10 best casks we've ever done. Which, I mean, it's hard to. I mean, I had to narrow down our 25 best casks, in my opinion, for something, and that was hard. But like to narrow it to 10 is even harder. That Ben Nevis was incredible, and this I actually think this is quite good. It's sad how much better that 22-year-old we had that was $180.
It's true, but so take away your expectations, nose this blindly, or knows this under the impression that this says Arthrusk on the label or Altavane or
This would
whatever
be
it may be.
immediately the best Othrusk I've ever had.
Exactly, right? It's not that it's bad whiskey. It's funky, it's different, it's cool. It's because you have expectations of Ben Nevis, and because I did too, especially the 96s, that I think we were both kind of let down. But we've already seen in the comments there that people are loving it and like our best nose so far and stuff, right?
But this is the other problem that I have.
That is the problem.
470.
Why is
Yeah,
that?
I think it's because the producer and or the importer have clued in that 96 Ben Nevis is hot, so
Exactly.
you jack up the price on it.
Exactly.
I think this should have been around, based on everything else that we're looking at here, 3.25, maybe 340 max.
Agreed.
And I just feel it's way overpriced. I mean, it's going to sell eventually, but yeah.
I did. We got to take it back in the comments there. Chris Walker apparently is milking sardines or something. Like freshly squeezed sardines. Somebody already commented on the visual, but that one's, I'm seeing that later tonight.
Well, maybe if you dip your jujubes in sardine juice just before you eat them, I could see that. That might be a thing. I mean, I've had some very strange smelling and tasting dips in Mediterranean parts of Europe, so you never know.
Wow, that's cool. We still need to fight with all these fantastic folks who join us for these tastings that sit with their screen all gray. We can't hear them anyways. Is this people that don't want to put on pants for these tastings? We love seeing your faces, people. Come on.
Yeah. Do you remember who it was? We had somebody who was like attending during COVID, a lot of our tastings, and every time they would wear a different hat. Does that ring a bell for you?
I don't know, but I remember we romanced the shit out of the fantastic beards we were seeing over COVID. Like we were calling out people's amazing beards almost every episode we did of these things. But
yeah,
I remember the hat thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's not on here, but I know Emmett's a friend of his. Peter Green had perhaps one of, if not the best, COVID beards that we saw during the tastings. So, and it's true, pants aren't required. But Kevin, to be fair, if you know me well, that's kind of the ethos that I live by. In fact, I showed up to Bowmore in pants, well, what is it, 10-ish days ago. And Margaret, the distillery manager's wife and mainly the visitor center manager, she looked at me and literally said, why aren't you wearing shorts? Because apparently I'm the guy who wears shorts regardless of the weather in Scotland. And I've told people this story in the past and they didn't believe it. And Sean was there. And literally she said, I almost didn't recognize you because you weren't wearing shorts. So pants are highly, highly overrated.
You don't need to wear pants around the shop, Andrew, but if you could at least wear underwear, that'd be great for the rest of us.
I'm wearing underwear under my shorts. I assure you they're there.
On that note, should we try some Jura?
Yeah, let's go on to Jura. I can't remember if we've had this before, if this is one. Now, our good friend Lee, he's a good salesman. And I'm pretty sure we brought this in because Lee said that I wasn't in there and the staff tried it and liked it. So I stood fine. I put it on the order. I don't remember much about this one. Is that how that happened? That did actually happen?
Yeah, Lee came in and it's a tough gig being an agent. You can't always be buying bottles and cracking them open and pouring them for people. It eats into your bottom line. But Lee's really, really good for coming in and being like, I'm going to buy a bottle of this. Let's crack it open right away and pour it. And we opened it and went, holy crap, that's really good Jura. And I have to concede, Isla is home away from home for me. Jura is a kilometer across the water and is one of my least favorite distilleries in the world. There's just something about Jura that doesn't work for me until you go back into like the 70s or something special like that. But every now and then you find one that's really, really cool. We had a signatory one not long ago I liked, and then we had this one land not too long after, and I was like, man, I need to do a Jura tasting for my club. But unfortunately, I didn't get to it.
So, but not to detract too much from where we're at. Actually, I'll save this for when we get back to the Glenburgie in a bit. Yeah, Jura is one that I struggle with a little bit too, and I think part of it is because I'm not always a fan of what White and Mackay does with the liquid in particular. A lot of wine casks and a lot of wine casks that have not been either rinsed or recharred. It's definitely got potential. I think I have a prop here. I hope I have one left. Or maybe I don't. But there used to be some incredible 1970s vintage Juras. The 77 and 76, I want to say, Kurt. I don't know if you remember those.
Yeah, there was a 76 and a 77.
Yeah.
The 77 was really good, like really good. The 76 though was legendary, like freaking incredible. You get a chance to have a time of that. Yeah. So good.
And I think what I liked about those was that it was, I think the Jura spirit, like the stills are very tall, they're very dumpy. I don't think that they produce the cleanest spirit just because they're so large in the way they're run. I think Jura is one of those whiskeys that needs time to polish the rough edges of it.
Yeah.
It just can't be rushed. You cannot have great Jura at 12, 15 years of age because of the way it's made. And like the 21, I remember the one that came with the little scroll, I thought was a great release of Jura. And so there's been good ones, but yeah, it's a very hit or miss distillery for me.
Yeah, age definitely helps, and getting away from the OBs definitely helps. Yeah. So I like Jura more as a distillery and as a concept than I do as a whiskey, if that makes any sense. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say to your point, Kurt, like if you've never had a chance to visit, I mean, Jura is like Isla's Isla. It's this remote, hard to get to place with like hardly any people. They're very friendly, and there's a distillery there. I mean, it's an absolutely beautiful place. The distillery is fascinating too. Like the manager's office, and then there's accommodations that are like third and fourth floor. It's just this bizarro building in a tiny little coastal town frankly in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, it's sadly very hit or miss.
I am gonna steal that. That was so well put. The Isla's Isla. That's incredible. That'll be used in my tastings every time I pour Jura from now on. So when I talk about loving Jura though, as it stands, Andrew will be able to speak to this one too. Jura for a long time had two gentlemen that were like incredible. Willie and Willie. There was Willie Tate and Willie Cochran. Willie Cochran kept pretty close to home base and stuff. Willie Tate was more the ambassador guy. And Willie Tate was this tiny, or he is, but he's no longer there. But I shouldn't say he was, because that implies really nasty things. He's like the white version of Papa Smurf, like less blue. In other words,
I was going to say like a very short Captain Highliner would be how I describe it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely he is. So we did a tasting for the club, and we wanted to do this huge. And we did the 76 and 77 and 30-year-old and all these great ones. Willie came out and did this presentation for us, probably 80 people in a community hall. And we pulled together every Jura OB we could find. We had them sourced. We had, at the time, Jay Wheelock repped them, so he was helping us find cool stuff. We had 20 or 21 different Jura OBs on the table in the front of the room behind the road. And we had our range for the tasting, and then everybody got a ticket or 2 tickets or something to be able to come up afterwards and try any of the other Jura that they wanted. We didn't want people to get sloshed, so we had to be a little controlling. But at that start of that tasting, I remember Willie, humble little dude, amazing, heart of gold, stood in front of the room and he held his arms out and kind of looked back at all the whiskeys, and he started to tear up and he said, "This is my life's work." And he put his head down for a second, and I was like, holy shit, if I needed any reason to love Jura, that's it. The sentiment just got me right in the feels. So I really do have a soft spot for Jura.
Willie Cochran is truly amazing. I believe he's still with us. But like he was unintentionally hilarious too. He was doing a tasting in our shop where we were pouring one of the 76 or 77, I can't remember which. And he kept saying, "I don't know why They put whiskey in boxes. Nobody cares about the box. You can't eat the box. And he kept saying you can't eat box. And like, it was a room full of men on that evening. There was no ladies there. And he kept snickering when he said this. And finally, I had to stop him and say, Willie, eating box has a very different connotation in our country than it does in yours. And he had a good laugh about that. He was a very, very good sport, very good sense of humor. But also, while we're on it, because there's so few opportunities to tell this story, I just want to shed a little light on the other Willie, who was also barely 5 feet tall. I think that at one point was like job requirements to work in Jura. You had to be roughly 5 feet tall and named Willie. But Willie Tate, the other Willie, this is a very rural island. So if you want eggs, like fresh eggs and stuff, you got to have your own chickens. And one of his daughters played with the chickens because there was not many other children on the island to play with. And allegedly, his daughter was running around playing with one of the chickens and it dropped dead at her feet. And she was devastated because this was like her friend. And the story goes that Willie took whiskey from his flask and poured it in the chicken's beak and then gave it mouth to mouth. And the chicken came back to life. And to this day, some of the locals refer to him as the Jesus of Jura.
The whiskey Lazarus. That's amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a fascinating place. If you're ever in Scotland and you have a couple of days to kill, I highly recommend going and staying at the one hotel on the island. And if you can, to drive up the island, it's just spectacular. I know Kurt's done this. You can do a boat trip up. You haven't done the boat trip to see Corey Vrecken?
I haven't. We were booked, but weather got very, very uncooperative.
As it can happen. It's just a spectacular island. There's these wild goats, these wild black goats that like end up on sea rocks and stuff. It's a crazy place, and it's well worth a visit. This whiskey's growing on me too. It's one of the youngest ones in our lineup tonight, but in fact, it might be the youngest in the lineup tonight.
It's really good whiskey. There's a reason we said, yeah, absolutely, we want it. It's fruity, it's jammy, it's not typical Jura. It's a cool whiskey.
Mm-hmm. It's got that like old aged Gouda note on there too, which a number of Jura whiskeys have for me as well.
Great cask, great, like Jura, again, you hinted at it earlier, the spirit just doesn't seem to be my thing. I don't know if it's their cut points. I don't know if it's not enough contact or what it is. Mm-hmm. But whatever they've done with this, maybe it's lipstick on a pig, who knows? But whatever they've done with this cask type, it's incredible. Good, mm-hmm. Juicy whiskey.
Mm-hmm. Kevin would like to go buy the Jesus of Jura. They should do a Jesus of Jura bottling. I mean, sure, you might offend a few people, but like, how incredible would that story be? Like, you could get a graphic artist to do up a little children's book about it. It'd be incredible. I mean, maybe leave out some details about whiskey, make it about the kids, but I definitely think there's something there. All right. Shall we on to the last whiskey here, the Highland Park?
Last whiskey of the tasting.
Yeah.
8 o'clock, man.
It's true. It is true. I just have to find the.
I don't endorse that.
All right, Old Malt Cask Orkney 14-year. I was a little intrigued about this one before we brought it in, just because undisclosed Highland Park, obviously. I think I even did some digging. I don't even know if Jura was distilling it the year that this one was produced in particular. It might have been.
Scapa, me?
Scapa, yeah, Scapa. Anyway, let me just share my screen here. This is it.
This actually noses closer to a Scapa than it does a Highland Park for me.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, there's not a ton of peat present on the nose. I mean, even though Highland Park is a very lightly peated single malt, it's more kind of barley and honey and funk.
Okay, the palate is more Highland Park. The palate for sure is Highland Park, actually. But the nose is deceptive. And I think I can see on the notes there on the screen, it says that there is no mention of smoke. Yeah, the nose is shy.
Well, they don't even talk. I mean, this shows you how good distiller producer tasting notes can be at times. There's not even any mention of smoke or peat on the palate, and it's definitely there. It's not an overwhelming amount of peat, but it's a nice clean smoke. It's a nice kind of chocolatey, grassy peat. It's definitely there. So it, to me, I mean, it's good. And I mean this in a good way. It's a little bit on the barnyardy side for me on the palate.
I like that farminess though. That's what I hunt for in like Longrow and Ben Romick and Auroras and stuff like that. That farminess.
Farmy,
Sorry.
farmy can be good. Sometimes it can be too much.
It can.
Ardmore, a lot of Ardmore is way too farmy for me.
That might just be that it's Ardmore. Can't lie. This one, I get actually a little bit of almost sesame oil on the mid palate. And then it just goes into those deeper, dirtier smoke tones and black licorice and rubber kind of in the back end.
Yeah, it keeps building, and it does get tarrier and earthier as you go with it, more leathery, more licorice.
I like Kevin's burnt marshmallow note on the palate. That's, again, same sort of wheelhouse for me when I talk about those leathers and black licorices and stuff. Burnt marshmallow typically goes with those as like almost like a trifecta.
Well, I don't know. I like it. I think it's good. I'm not really wowed by it.
Small sips don't do it any favor. A medium-sized sip or coats the mouth and swallow and like let it be kind of juicier. I quite like it. There's a lot of barley sugars going on here. It's quite sweet. And I'm not a fan of this style of Highland Park. I can't lie. We had a fair little run for a while there of youngish, undeclared Highland Parks and secret Orkneys and stuff. It was a tough period of selling for me because it's not a style I typically get excited about. But this one's on the better end of the spectrum.
It might be tonight, it might be my palate, but I'm struggling with it. I just don't find it exciting. And maybe that's missing the point. Maybe 14-year-old undisclosed Orkney whiskey shouldn't be exciting. But I'm just not, yeah. And in fairness, I mean, well, I guess if I'm going to compare it to the Jura, that Jura to me was much more exciting than this Highland Park. But
so Dave was over last night and he brought one of the old bottles of Highland Park 15. And I know there's some of you guys that are not so young anymore like me that probably remember those old straight shouldered Highland Park bottles and had the yellow band, yellowish kind of band, yellow, slightly greenish color band for the Highland Park 15. That was a whiskey that always bored me. It was one of the weakest in their range. Having gone back to it last night, I was like, damn, whiskey is not what it used to be. Like it was a really cool bottle to revisit, but it also made me kind of harken back. So many of these Highland Parks we've seen through the Indies, like this guy, are ex-bourbon, right? What made Highland Park famous? It was they were inheriting ex-Macallan casks. After Macallan was done with them, they were kind of tired, but they were still pulling a lot of that sherry influence out of them. It was good smoke and good sherry together that made Highland Park the legend it was, right? So these are a lot more naked, and I think we're not getting that same degree of fruitiness to fight that dark kind of billowy smokiness we were just talking about. Different style. It's not what Highland Park used to be, but it's a cool different style.
I mean, I remember that old style, like the old 18s, like going back to the round bottles.
Yeah, man.
They had kind of like I don't know, a sunset and like ruins, like standing stones kind of motif on them. Yeah. Those were incredible whiskeys. I don't mind bourbon cask, refill cask, Highland Park, especially when it's good. I actually struggle more with that modern style of sherried Highland Park that comes out.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think we poured one. Didn't we do like a big Highland Park tasting about a year ago where, yeah, we did the ice and fire, and I don't know, we kind of made fun of all the stupid marketing gimmicks they came up with. I just don't love a lot of that new style sherry period, and I don't think it works with Highland Park. And I don't mind bourbon cask Highland Park when it's good, but it still has to be good. And I think, I don't know, just I've not seen a ton of good spirit out of that distillery in a while.
That's fair. The speaking of bourbon cask, if any of you guys were lucky enough, for a while there was a little sleeper tip that we were sharing to anybody that came into the shop. Highland Park 18 was sitting at 220. Highland Park full volume was sitting at about 130 or something. I can't remember. Same age. It was an 18-year-old Highland Park, but it was an ex-bourbon, not sherry. If you got your hands on the full volume, I'm a guitarist, and I freaking hated that packaging with the Marshall stack sort of thing they had going on with it. Ugly as hell, but man, that was a good whiskey. Highland Park can be amazing in bourbon if it's done properly. That was an incredible dram. If you find it kicking around, the price was right. Buy a bottle. It's really good, but it's probably long gone.
Chris saying it reminds him a little bit of Ovaltine. I have to say, I don't even have a sense of what Ovaltine is. I'm not sure I've ever had it in my life.
It's a weird malty kind of chocolatey sort of thing. It's not entirely pleasant. I can't lie.
Yeah, it's gross.
Yeah. Chris said it. It's gross. Yeah.
All right. I think it's time for us to go back through the range.
Yes.
And while we're doing that, I can try to create a poll here so we can vote on our favorite whiskeys, if that sounds good. So Kurt, I might lean on you a little bit to keep this chugging along while I type in the question.
That'll be hard. I'm shy. These people know I never talk too much or anything. There was a comment there that I will address because so much shade has been thrown here. There's been this rumor that I just hold guitars for my hand fixation and I don't know how to play them. And I've kind of just started.
Thing to suggest. Yeah,
I've kind of just perpetuated that over time. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to play loud. I'm not going to let you hear it because it's just kind of fun, right? I was sitting in the shop and I can't lie. It's all quiet. Secrets here. I had a shitty morning a little while ago. I was like, I'm going to go to work early, but I'm going to go swing by Guitar Works and pick up a guitar and play a little bit and, just see what's what. And I went in and I picked up a couple electrics, this great Chrissy Hine Telecaster that I was in love with, mirror picker and everything. I went into the acoustic room just because, and I picked up a Martin D18. I don't know what I was thinking, like stupid expensive, few $1,000s kind of thing. I walked out and went, oh man, I need that guitar now. Next day, I went back, I got that guitar. I got it on my way to work. So I wasn't going to leave a $4,000 guitar or whatever it was in my vehicle while I went and worked for 8 hours in Kensington, where we've got some very interesting neighbors, let's just put it that way. So I took the guitar into the shop and I was sitting at the table noodling. First time I've been playing on an acoustic in a very long time, so clumsy fingers and whatever. My feet up, Harmony recorded it. I don't know if any of you guys saw it. It was on our story or something, apparently. I didn't even see it. I don't know how bad it was or anything. So people heard me play then. And then the last time Evan's like, okay, play us out because I am on acoustic. So I started playing. Now I guess I have to play occasionally. So yes, I can play guitar. Is that enough rambling for you?
Kurt, are you sure it was like, just you casually playing and it wasn't like, a staged casual moment?
It's a form of lip syncing. I just move my fingers in a convincing manner. I watch other guitarists see what they do and try to emulate it.
Fair enough. All right. Well, let's start making our way around the horn here. I've almost got the poll teed up. Royal Lochnagar, how's that showing second time around?
I like it even more now. It's more balanced. I'm getting a slight sort of lightly custardy, almost like slightly lemon pie without real tartness, just a light sort of lemon tone there. Still that floral note. It's soft. It's pretty. Super balanced whiskey.
Oh man, it's not letting me edit the questions. It's still very, to me, it's still very elegant, very soft. It's pretty.
I like that one.
Yeah, it's showing well.
Yep, it is. That's a tough spot to be in too.
All right, this poll's not cooperating tonight, so we're just gonna have to launch the favorite whiskey twice, rather than have go through it second time. But anyway, let's go on to Linkwood. How is that? It's a bit muted now compared to some of the others.
It still has like it's not quite cheesy to me as much as it is like somebody takes off their shoes after a run. It's got that slightly salty, footy sort of smell to it. And that's not a bad thing as much as we list these kind of weird notes sometimes. It's got a lot of sour fruits, but it just has that slightly almost cheesy sort of sweaty note. Still in my wheelhouse. I like the style.
Yeah.
I think the Lochnagar did a little better in the glass over the time though.
Yeah, I'd agree. Linkwood's good, not quite as expressive as the Lochnagar, and yet it's got more color to it, more oak character than the other. These are all natural color, no added color in any of these. What about the Glenburgie? The Glenburgie is kind of fun now. It's like Christmas cookies.
It's like she's come into her own. She's the prom queen now. That's pretty. I like the way that one developed.
I'm getting like shortbread. I'm also getting, and I looked them up for a tasting note. When I was a little kid, my mom used to make these deep fried, very like hollow, thin cookies that she would then dust with powdered sugar. And this reminds me of those cookies. I don't remember what I put those in a tasting note for. I think it was one of the boutique blends. I'm going to have to look that up.
How am I ever going to know if your tasting note is right unless your mom made some of those cookies?
I should ask her about that. She's literally not made them since I was probably 10, which is sad. But I'm going to see if I can get the name of those cookies because I put it in at least one tasting note recently.
Having said that, we do accept cookies at Kensington Wine Market, just saying.
We do.
If Jeff was here, there would be a bucket load that will show up tomorrow for some reason, but
yeah.
Hint.
You know whose cookies we've never seen though, and she's not in this tasting, but Auntie Beth. I believe she bakes cookies, and I'm pretty sure we've never seen any of her cookies.
Let's make a tasting out of that. Let's talk to Beth. Let's get some of her cookies and pair them with some whiskeys.
That's not a bad idea. They're called rosette cookies. That was the name of the cookie I'm looking for. So they'd often be made into like a floral pattern, dusted with powdered sugar. I remember there'd be like tins of them, and then I'd want to eat them, and my mom would be like, "No." Anyway, childhood memories. Shall we move on to the Miltonduff?
Oh man. I don't know what to say.
It's like it's antique-y. It's got this like old church polished oak kind of thing going on to it too, and donuts, like going into a fancy donut shop like the Hoopla guys here in town.
Yeah, they're fun. We like their stuff, and Leslie is a sweetheart there. The owner's been slacking. He used to bring in Hoopla donuts for it from time to time, and
I should bring in some Hoopla donuts again soon. That's true.
True. You guys are really a seasoned crew here. There's so many familiar names in this tasting. Stick your nose in that glass for a second and tell me you're not seeing bourbon. It's so bourbony in all the right ways. It's got all those sort of cherry tones, a little bit of a waxiness, lots of spices and cinnamon. You can absolutely see a bourbon cask screaming in here, and I love it.
All right. Yeah, that's a gorgeous, gorgeous whiskey.
Wow. Yeah, you did good on that one, Andrew. I'm glad you brought in lots of that.
Yeah, I mean, even when we looked at the list, I was like, ooh, I had to go back through my notes and check. I don't remember committing to all this, and I hadn't. But I did revise my notes on this when I saw this because it looked so intriguing. And then we go, I don't know, things have gone a little wayward nose wise for me on a number 5. It's still super meaty. I mean, it's not in really a bad way. It's yeah, fish sauce, beef bouillon.
With a little bit of like graham cracker crumbled up in it or something almost.
But this is also it's also got that like wet horse in the stable sort of.
On the palate, I would guess it's Ben Nevis. On the nose, blindly, I would guess it was Glen Scotia.
I would actually guess it was Ardmore based on the nose for me.
Wow, crazy.
I mean, it's again like wet horse, like meatloaf, and not like good meatloaf, but like the kind of meatloaf you don't want to eat.
So there's good meatloaf. I've not found it yet.
There is good. Well, it's like haggis. I mean, when it's done well, it's great. But
it's like haggis. When it's done well, you're still eating haggis.
So good.
I've had some haggis that was okay, but I've never had one that I was like, oh man, that's good. Give me more. Never, ever. And I've had haggis probably in 20 different ways, as you have, I'm sure.
Some interesting comments on the Ben Nevis, and I have to say, I love the fact that there's people here who are like, I love the Ben Nevis. It's my favorite whiskey in tonight's tasting. Partly because there's so much room out there for disagreement and for differences of opinion and different palates. And yeah, I mean, I'm certainly been spoiled in the Ben Nevi. I think that should be the plural. I don't know if it is, but it should be the plural for Ben Nevis.
Is now.
Yeah, it's a cool distillery, but this one just is not, the palate's fine. Yeah, I think Cam Ross hit it on the head. It just doesn't have the fruit that usually balances out the funk. There's just a ton of funk tonight.
Yeah, I think that's one whiskey, because you guys know me, I'm a noser. I love having my nose in the glass and pulling out notes and stuff. This is a whiskey that's better not nosed. The mid palate on is absolutely great. It's into those brilliant fruit tones and almost tropicals and stuff. It's really fun on the palate, but the nose kind of is a little bit of probably a barrier for people. And Chris just said you need to try haggis when it's boiled in stout. It's delicious. Okay. How often is a piece of meat that's been boiled your ideal piece of meat? Just saying. And not to mention, man, it's getting more and more tough to find the wild and elusive haggis. So maybe we should just leave that boiled haggis alone and not.
You know what's sad is I don't even know if they're still in business. I hope they are, but back in the olden times when I started doing my tastings, we would serve a haggis every night. Like we would serve, like it would be towards the end of the tasting, and I don't know when that started. And there was a place in Calgary called McEwen's Meats that did quite good haggis, and all we had to do was warm it up. And you know, back then, like people, they would like, I remember when we first stopped serving haggis at the tasting, there was nearly an uprising. Like people were outraged that we weren't serving haggis anymore.
Was that McEwen's Meat? Was that the one by Heritage area?
Yeah, it was on Elbow Drive.
Yeah.
Between Heritage and Southland.
What happened there for a period where we couldn't get it and stuff? There was a change in regulations, and there was a certain piece of the offal, like OFFAL, that was in the haggis that was not okay to be imported into Canada. So regulations changed again a few years ago. So now we can properly get their haggis back, but we couldn't get it for a period. And I say Canada, but it may have only been Alberta. I don't know, but I thought it was Canada. It's on my, I have to check that. Now, having said that, Andrew, you've been there, you've tried this stuff and everything. I decided to do a Burns night at my house one year and invited a whole shitload of people and had some brilliant whiskeys pulled out. And I put that haggis in the oven, and about an hour later, my wife had every window in this house cranked and told me I was never allowed to do it again. It was not a good smell cooking in the house. Just saying.
Oh man. Well, I think you left it in there too long is ultimately what happened.
Look,
Maybe we'll, you know what? It's been far too long since I've had to recite the ode to a haggis. And I think we're gonna have to get one baked up and served, and we'll have to, you know, speak old Scottish to it and carve it up with a knife.
I want to see that happen. I want you rocking the thick fair fire on a sunsy face, the thick accent. I want you with a kilt and one leg up and the whole thing. That needs to happen now.
Well, you know what? January is not that far off, so let's see what
It's
we can
not.
do with that. I don't mean to move on from the Ben Nevis, but I kind of want to move on from the Ben Nevis because I really like that Jura by comparison. I just think I mean, who'd have thought a 2007 Jura would nudge a 96 Ben Nevis out of the way, but I think it's what's happened here.
I'll still take the Ben Nevis just because I love that mid palate. But
Yeah.
you're right. The Jura all around is a better whiskey than that Ben Nevis is. No choice about it.
I think it shows really well. I think if I were to taste that blind, I'm not sure. I would actually suspect that I would think that Jura's older than it actually is. I think it's a nice whiskey. I really enjoy it. And actually, before I forget, and because so many of these stories happen and then I forget about them, I probably should have written them down. But did I ever tell you why I had to learn the address to the haggis? It was because I used to host a Burns dinner. It started with Richard Patterson, who did his thing where he criticizes all the people not in the room and throws the ice and water. But instead, the bumbling guy who was his rep was fiddling with an electric cord and then tripped right as Richard was throwing the ice and water, and he threw it on his back. And from that point on, it was like always the honor for my guests to give the address to the haggis until George Grant, and some of these people had never done it. They actually learned it just to give it at the tasting because it was all part of the experience. George Grant refused. He just wouldn't do it. And not only would he not do it, but he disappeared for long stretches of time and we'd have to go looking for him. And usually he was out back behind the venue smoking with the dish pit boy, as George Grant would. So that's why I had to learn the address to the haggis, because George refused to do it, even though he accepted my invitation to be the guest of honor at my Burns supper. So
it's a mouthful, man. Well done. Because I've learned probably the first couple verses of it in the past, and I would have to refresh myself, but I've never learned the whole thing. It's quite a handful.
You know what? I thought I'd forgotten it, and then randomly a couple weeks ago, I can't remember where I was or what I was doing, and I went through the whole thing, and I was kind of like, wow.
Wow, good for you.
I always get hung up on one or two parts. Anyway, Orkney.
Nose is getting better. Slight almondy tone. Again, the smoke is so shy on this one. I'm blown away. This is Highland Park.
Yeah, there's no smoke on the nose. The palate's got a bit of muddy peat. I like it, but it's not exciting, especially in the context of everything else we've had tonight.
Yeah, I'm not digging the palate very much. I like the nose a lot, but the palate is not really working for me.
All right, here comes voting round one. We're going to do this twice because it wasn't letting me copy the questions, which is quite frustrating. So I'm going to close that down for a moment. Kurt, while we're doing this, while we're letting people vote and whatnot, and while Chloe's storming around upstairs chasing Walter, who should come down and make a brief appearance before we wrap up tonight's tasting. What are you most excited about in the shop these days? What's kind of new and exciting for you?
Let me think. Not necessarily new, but most exciting right now. I know we've all got the romance right now for our new Glenfarclas 92 and everything like that. Lights out, incredible. But for me, and I think for Sean right now too, we're head over heels for our Ben Roma cask 49. That's one of the coolest casks we've brought in a long time. There it is. There's the 92. We had a previous Ben Romick not too long ago. It was a little bit younger, a little bit rough and tumble compared to this one, a little more Brora-esque, actually, like a young Brora, a little bit more smoky and farmy. This new one is way more elegant at 18 years. It's an absolute stunner. Head over heels in love with that cask right now. And in the society outturn we just had, the 93 was a really good one. I'd actually messaged Evan going, I want one of these. And unfortunately, so did every customer. We have to back off and it sold out before I could get one. So that was a cool one. Kevin's asked if it's the Caragold or the KWM cask. KWM cask. Our 18-year-old cask 47. Unbelievable. If you haven't tried it, you have to. It's one of my favorite casks we've had in the last year or so. The Caragold, I'm dying to try. People have tried it. Sure.
I don't know if Emmett was part of it, but I know the Ottawa Whiskey Guild did a tasting recently, and that Ben Romick cask was by far, like, I think the #1 favorite in the tasting. And in fact, #2 was our Gordon MacPhail Mortlach 1998. So a couple of stunners. Ben Romick and Gordon MacPhail, in my opinion, are kind of killing it right now. You know, I was worried about a year ago. I thought the prices of their 20-something stuff was getting a little too high. Everybody else is now catching up because they're running out of stuff. But the quality of the Gordon MacPhail stuff is...
Yeah. I was going to say everybody's catching up in terms of prices, but not quality. They're still the heavyweights. Independent bottlers, nobody close to G&M. And as exciting distilleries go, Ben Romick is one of the top rated.
Yeah, it's Ben Romick is right up there. I love our 92. The Ben Romick is absolutely incredible. I think two of the whiskeys I'm most excited about, but I think are sleepers, are these two, are the boutique blends, the 32 and the 42. The labels on these are absolutely killer. So we got a tasting coming up with that. But I also promised, since I know some of you guys follow me on Instagram, Chloe brought the Walter downstairs just to say hi to everybody.
Where's Chloe? Hey, Chloe.
Chloe's here. She's just on the other side of the screen. Anyway, Walter may be the future TCA smelling dog. I'm not sure. But regardless, he's pretty cute. He does have to be watched at all times, though, because he does things that can't be undone to fabric surfaces, as it were. But he's a good boy by and large. He's pretty cute. So anyway, just wanted him to say hi quickly. And yes, he has one brown and one blue eye. And he's pretty awesome. So Walter's going to say goodnight. Go back with Chloe. All right, voting round 1. I'll share the polls here. And man, the Miltonduff killed it. The Ben Nevis, I don't know why that says choice 5. Oh, I guess I didn't delete it. Looks like the Ben Nevis finished second, and the Linkwood and Glenburgie honorable mentions round 1. So that's first favorite. I'll share that with you all for a moment, and then we're going to do voting round 2. We'll do one more round where you get to vote for your second favorite whiskey. Again, apologies that I couldn't do that the first time, but here we go. I'm going to clear it and start the poll one more time. So relaunch poll. Here we go. Yeah, Kurt. Oh, hey, did Sean give you those Compass Box like guitar picks?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, that's fun.
Here's one of them right here.
I have to say, I mean, Compass Box does some fun marketing stuff. They've got their new Flaming Heart coming out. They were handing out T-shirts in Paris and London like they were Kleenex. Like everybody was wearing Flaming Heart T-shirts. I don't remember the new Flaming Heart though. Just too many whiskeys tried over the weekend. I do remember it being good. But yeah, no, those guitar picks were kind of cool too. I kept meaning to grab some, and then I saw Sean grab a bunch. I was like, "You don't play guitar, do you?" He's like, "No, they're for Kurt." And it's like, "Oh, good." I was going to grab some. So
you guys make me feel all warm and fuzzy.
I mean, I think I actually technically said to Sean, Kurt pretends to play guitar because I'd never witnessed it before, and anyway, we had a good laugh. Looks like most of you, oh, there he goes. If you haven't voted, you've got 20 seconds to do your second favorite. The second round appears to be quite even. So we'll give it another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and end it. Here we go. The Lochnagar, Glenburgie, Miltonduff, and Jura tie for first favorite whiskey in round 2. Almost everything got some votes. Interesting that the Ben Nevis was second favorite in round 1, but not at all in round 2. Kevin says they're pretty even tasting. Absolutely. I mean, I think we had a grain share. I would say there was 5 whiskeys here that were all great. But before I tell you my favorites, Kurt, I'm curious to know if you had to pick 2 whiskeys from tonight's tasting, what would they be?
Easy peasy for this guy. So there were some really good ones that I would still want, but if I had to pick my top 2, unquestionably the Miltonduff and the Lochnagar. Both of those. Yeah, the Miltonduff it's right what I'm looking for in whiskey, like 100%. The only way that could be better is if it was a slightly more tired cask and maybe went a couple years deeper, but come on, we're talking about a 29-year-old whiskey. Not getting judgy on that, happily drink that. But the Lochnagar, I think, was just such a surprise for me for how cool it was for, a distillery we never see, had the quality level that I'm looking for. I didn't expect it to be as good as it was. That to me was a really cool one. And I think when we came back at it the second time, it evolved to be even better than I found it the first time. So cool drawing that one.
Okay. I agree with you on the Miltonduff. For me, that was hands down my favorite whiskey in tonight's tasting. I think the Royal Lochnagar was third. For me, the Glenburgie was number 2. Maybe a bit of bias creeping in there. Honorable mention to the Jura. Like, I'm surprised. I don't think I've tried that yet. And I know, like, even Lee's like, oh, you got to try this. Your staff love it. Or I don't know. Maybe you guys brought a glass into me while I was working in the office and I didn't really give it too much thought. But for a young Jura, that showed really well for me. So yeah, and even the Linkwood wasn't bad, like was pretty good. But I mean, that Miltonduff to me, I think was, even with everything being equal in tonight's tasting, I just think that's the best whiskey and the best buy of the whole bunch. So
yeah, agreed. What is the price on that one again, Andrew?
I want to say $375.
I had it in my head it was $389, but then I was questioning myself because at 29 years old, I thought it should be higher than that actually. And I hate to say that because it shouldn't be higher than that. That's the reality, but that's just
380. So it's close.
Yeah. It's a good price nowadays. I hate that we can honestly say that that's a good price for whiskey, but when you look comparatively with what's on the market, it's better than 90% at that price point.
Well, and I mean, we've got a Gordon MacPhail Miltonduff 89 that's $1,000 basically, and it's sold out, and it was in high demand. And I think part of that is that weight that Gordon MacPhail now carries with the quality of their bottlings.
Yeah.
This first edition's Miltonduff is an incredible value. To be honest, I think when we first saw that pricing 8 months ago, it looked expensive, and then when it arrived, by the time it arrived here, it looked frankly cheap. One quick comment. I know James said they don't share t-shirts and things with him at all. James, you can probably get the graphics from Compass Box and do your own t-shirts, but don't use British sizing. I grabbed a double XL and it still doesn't fit me. We need North American sizes on Compass Box t-shirts. It's an imperative. Also, they should totally be printing shirts for this side of the pond too. But anyway, Phil and Suzanne saying 40 tastings and Kurt finally played guitar. I mean,
I'll start taking requests next time.
That seemed more like he was just tuning. I'm not sure if that would qualify as playing, but it's true. We heard the noise come out of it. So, anyway, I think this was a great range tasting tonight. This is, I think, my first tasting of the fall. I was away traveling back into it. Really looking forward to Friday's Bruichladdich tasting. I think that's going to be not really Bruichladdich, that Bruichladdich and Kensington casks tasting. I think that's going to be a great one. There are other events coming up this fall that have still got room. We're going to add a couple more before we close everything off. And if you haven't already, but you're planning on buying a 2022 KWM whiskey calendar, the early bird deadline is tomorrow midnight. So don't forget about that. Details are on the website. We're still finalizing the design and the list of products, but I just got some good news tonight. More of the products just arrived in Alberta. So we're getting close to being able to actually box this thing up in hopefully a couple weeks time. Kurt, thank you as always for joining me on tonight's tasting. I think this was a fun one.
It was a fun one.
And I'm sure I'll be doing this with you again soon. Thank you to everybody who tuned in Calgary and all over Western and Eastern and Central Canada. Nice to see people from all over the country. And yeah, until next time, have a great night, stay safe, and enjoy what's left of your whiskeys if there's anything left. Kurt, I guess you're going to play us out, or? Do you know how to play closing time? Maybe we could do that for a festival.
Every time we have an in-store event, that's the song I put on when we start cleaning up. It's like, we love you guys, but get the hell out of here.
Get the hell out of here. We want to go home. Yeah. Well,
on that note.
Yeah. Good night, all. Take care.